The text that came through on my phone at 2047 in the morning wasn't long. Just 11 words. But I've read those 11 words probably 1,000 times since then, and every single time, my stomach drops the same way it did that first night. Dad. Don't sign anything they put in front of you. I mean anything. That was it. No explanation. No, I'll call you in the morning. Just that from my son Nathan, who has been a criminal defense attorney in Columbus for the past 14 years. I sat up in bed in the dark, 68 years old, heart going faster than it had any business going. My reading glasses were on the nightstand. I put them on like that would help me understand what I was looking at. I read the message 3 more times. Then I set the phone face down on the blanket and just sat there, listening. Down the hall, I could hear the television. My younger son Kevin had a habit of falling asleep with it on. He and his wife Darlene had been living with me for 7 months by then. I could hear the low murmur of it through the wall, some late-night show, laugh track going every few seconds, and I sat there in the dark, thinking about what Nathan had just told me, and I started to understand that the sound of that television had never once made me feel comfortable. Not in 7 months. I'd just been telling myself it did. Let me back up, because none of this will make sense without context. I spent 31 years as a firefighter in Cincinnati. Retired at 58 with a pension, a paid-off house on Clover Hill Road, and 2 sons I was proud of. My wife Lorraine passed 4 years ago, ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Those 14 months were the hardest of my life, and the year after wasn't much easier. I rattled around that house alone. 4 bedrooms, a yard I kept up mostly out of habit, a kitchen that was too big for one person. Nathan was solid through all of it. Drove down from Columbus every other weekend for the first year. Called every few days. He's got a wife, 2 kids, a busy practice, but he showed up. I never had to ask him twice for anything. Kevin was different. He always had been. He's my son and I love him, but Kevin has spent most of his adult life believing that the next opportunity was always just around the corner. He'd had 4 jobs in 6 years when Lorraine got sick. He borrowed money from us twice during that period. Once to cover rent when he got laid off from a logistics company. Once for something to do with a car he was going to flip for profit that never quite worked out. Lorraine never said a word about the money to him directly, but I know it bothered her. She was practical in a way Kevin never managed to be. So when Kevin called me 11 months ago and told me that he and Darlene had hit a rough patch, he'd been let go from his sales job. They were 2 months behind on their apartment rent in Dayton. They just needed somewhere to land while he figured things out. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He's my son. I had a 4-bedroom house. What I didn't anticipate was Darlene. I want to be fair here, because I spent a long time second-guessing my own instincts about her. She's not loud or aggressive. She's actually very pleasant on the surface. She bakes. She cleans. She asks how I'm feeling. In the first few weeks, she told me multiple times that she was grateful to be there and didn't want to be a burden. But there were small things. Little things I noticed and then talked myself out of noticing. She started going through the mail before I got to it. I work in the garden most mornings. It's how I start my day. And by the time I came in, the mail would already be on the counter, stacked neatly, sometimes already opened. When I mentioned it once, she said she was just trying to help, that she'd noticed I sometimes forgot to check it, and she smiled when she said it in a way that made me feel like I was being difficult for bringing it up. Then she started asking questions about my finances, not direct questions at first, more like comments. Your pension must be nice after all those years. Or I saw a statement from your investment account on the counter. I didn't mean to look, but that's a good amount you've saved up. The way she'd say things and then immediately act like she hadn't said them. Kevin set up a new internet router about 2 months in. He said the old one was slow, which was true. I didn't think anything of it. I'm not particularly technical. I let him handle it. About a month after that, I noticed my phone was acting strangely. It was slower than usual. Apps I never opened were showing up in my recently used list. I mentioned it to Kevin, and he took the phone, looked at it for a few minutes, handed it back and said he'd updated a few things. It seemed fine after that. I let it go. What I didn't know, what I had absolutely no idea about, was that Kevin had installed a monitoring application on my phone. One that gave him access to my text messages, my call logs, my emails. He could see my bank app notifications in real time. Nathan found out because he's Nathan. He's methodical in a way I never fully understood until this whole thing unfolded. He'd noticed over several months that whenever he called me and mentioned anything financial, my pension, the house, an investment I was considering, Kevin would call me within a day or two and steer the conversation in a particular direction. It happened often enough that Nathan started keeping notes. He said nothing to me about it because he didn't want to alarm me before he was sure. He was sure by the time he sent that text. The morning after, I didn't sleep much. Kevin came downstairs around 8 and poured himself coffee, same as every morning. Darlene was already up, moving around the kitchen with the familiarity of someone who'd lived in a house for years rather than months. She'd rearranged my cabinet above the stove at some point, and I still hadn't said anything about it. Kevin set a manila folder on the kitchen table in front of me. "Dad, I've been meaning to talk to you about something," he said. His voice was careful. Too careful. Darlene and I have been doing some research, and we've been talking to a financial planner. We think it would make a lot of sense for you, just for protection, to set up a durable power of attorney. He said it like he was doing me a favor. I looked at the folder. I looked at my son. I thought about 11 words on a phone screen at 2047 in the morning. "What would that involve?" I asked. I kept my voice even. "Just designating someone you trust to handle your finances if something happened to you," Darlene said from the counter. She said it lightly, casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You've worked so hard your whole life and you deserve to know everything is protected." "Who would be designated?" I asked. Kevin cleared his throat. "We were thinking I could take on that role. It just makes sense, me being here, being close by." I nodded slowly. I said I'd think about it. Kevin seemed satisfied with that. He told me there was no rush. I remember how easily he said it, no rush, and how wrong that turned out to be. Nathan called me an hour later. I walked out to the far end of the yard, near the back fence where the old oak is, and I talked quietly with my back to the house. He told me everything he'd pieced together. He'd had a colleague, someone he trusted, not a private investigator, just a friend who understood these things, run a quiet check on what Kevin and Darlene had been doing. What he found wasn't criminal, not technically, not yet. But it was a clear picture of intent. Kevin had contacted an elder law attorney in Dayton 3 months earlier. He'd asked questions about the process of having a parent declared financially incompetent. He'd asked under what circumstances a power of attorney could override a parent's decisions. He'd asked what evidence would be needed. He'd also been in communication with a real estate attorney, not because he was buying property, because he was looking into the process of having someone transfer property, my property. Nathan was quiet for a moment after he told me this. Then he said, "Dad, I need you to not react when you go back inside. I need you to act like everything is normal for a few more days. Can you do that?" I looked at the oak tree. Lorraine and I had planted that tree the year we moved into that house. It was the size of my thumb then. Now the branches go out over half the yard. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." What followed was 10 days that I will never fully be able to describe to anyone who hasn't lived through something similar. I went back inside that house every night and ate dinner with my son and his wife, watched television in the living room, said goodnight at a reasonable hour. And every morning I drove, always drove, never called from the house phone or used the home Wi-Fi, to the Panera on Kenwood Road, sat in the corner booth and talked to Nathan. Nathan had referred me to an attorney in Cincinnati, a woman named Ellen who specializes in estate law. She was direct and unhurried in the way that good lawyers are. She explained my options clearly and without alarm, which I appreciated. She told me I had the right to revoke any existing financial documents, update my will, and consult an independent financial advisor, and that none of those actions required anyone's knowledge or consent. She also told me something I hadn't thought about. She said that if I had reason to believe someone was monitoring my communications without my knowledge, I should have my phone examined by a professional. I took the phone to a small tech shop on Montgomery Road. The man there, a young guy named Anthony, found the application within 20 minutes. He showed me exactly what it was, what it accessed, and how long it had been running. 7 months. Since 2 weeks after Kevin moved in. I sat in the plastic chair in that shop and looked at the screen and thought about every conversation I'd had on that phone in the last 7 months. Every text to Nathan. Every call to my financial advisor. Every message to my friend Doug, who I play golf with and who knew about some investments I'd been considering. 7 months of my private life, running quietly through my son's phone. Anthony removed the application. He also showed me how to check for this in the future. I thanked him and drove to Ellen's office and updated my will. The will I changed, left the house, the investment accounts, and the bulk of my estate to Nathan. I left Kevin the minimum the state of Ohio legally allows, which, for those wondering, is not zero in all circumstances, but in my case, with a written explanation of my reasoning filed alongside the document. Ellen said it was solid and defensible. I'm not a vindictive person, but I am a practical one. Then I called a locksmith. I want to address something here because I know it's a logical question. I changed the locks, but Kevin and Darlene still had keys they'd had copied at some point. I found this out later, that first day after the new locks were installed. They came home and Kevin's key didn't work. He knocked. I answered the door and told him calmly that the locks had been changed, that I had a new key for him, and that I wanted to have a conversation. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd put that manila folder a week and a half earlier. I told him what I knew. Not everything Nathan had uncovered. Just enough. I told him I was aware that he had spoken to an attorney about power of attorney proceedings. I told him I was aware my phone had been monitored. Kevin went very still. Darlene started to say something and I held up one hand. I'm going to need you both to be out of the house within 30 days, I said. I've spoken to an attorney. Everything you need to know about the process is in this letter. I slid an envelope across the table. Ellen had helped me prepare it. Kevin's face went through about 4 different things in about 10 seconds. First, denial. He started to say he didn't know what I was talking about, then something like calculation. A brief moment where I could almost see him deciding whether there was still an angle. Then, when he saw my face, something that might have been shame. And then finally, what I can only describe as grief. Real grief. His eyes got wet. Dad, he said, we weren't going to hurt you. I know you told yourself that, I said. Darlene sat very still and said nothing. She didn't cry. I'll give her that. There was something almost like clarity in her expression, like someone who'd been caught at a game and decided the most dignified thing was to stop playing. She asked one question, whether they'd have help with first and last month's rent somewhere. I said that wasn't something I was prepared to help with at this time. They were out in 22 days. Nathan drove down the weekend after they left. We sat on the back porch with coffee, looking out at the yard. He asked me how I was doing, really doing, and I told him the truth, which is that I was exhausted in a way I hadn't felt since Lorraine died. Not devastated, exhausted, like I'd been holding my breath for 7 months without realizing it and only just let it out. I told him I was angry, but not only at Kevin. Some of it, maybe more than was comfortable to admit, was at myself. I had seen things and explained them away. The mail. The phone. The questions about my finances. The way Darlene had slowly, without any single dramatic moment, made herself central to the running of my house. I had let it happen because I loved my son, and because being loved is comfortable, and because it's easy, at 68 and living alone, to let people in further than you should. Nathan listened. He didn't tell me it wasn't my fault, which I respected. He said, "You caught it, Dad. That's what matters." It's been 8 months now. Kevin and I have spoken twice. Both times he called, and both times the conversation was short and careful, the way conversations are when two people are still figuring out if there's anything on the other side of something like this. I don't know yet. I'm not ready to know yet. My pastor says that forgiveness and reconciliation are 2 different things, and you can do one without doing the other, and I think about that a lot. Darlene I have not spoken to. Nathan and his family came for Thanksgiving. His daughter is 8 now and spent half the day in the backyard collecting acorns from the oak tree. I watched her from the kitchen window and thought about Lorraine, the way I always do, and felt something that wasn't quite happiness, but was in the neighborhood of it. My friend Doug asked me recently if I regretted letting Kevin move in the first place. I thought about it for a while before I answered. Longer than he expected, I think. No, I said. I don't regret it, because the alternative, not offering help to my son when he asked, would have made me someone I don't want to be. What I regret is not paying attention sooner. Not to Kevin, specifically. To my own instincts. I have always been someone who trusted his gut on a fireground, knew when a floor was about to go, knew when a room was about to flash, developed that sense over 31 years and trusted it with my life and the lives of the men I worked with. I turned that same instinct off the moment I walked into my own house. I told myself it was love, and maybe some of it was. But some of it was also convenience and loneliness, and not wanting to look at something I didn't want to see. I look at it now. I've learned to look at it. The house is quiet most mornings. I still garden. I still play golf with Doug on Wednesdays when the weather allows. I still drive to Panera sometimes and sit in the corner booth. But now I just read the paper instead of whispering into my phone. It's my house. It's my life. My name is on both of them, and I'll be damned if I ever forget that again. I've had a lot of time to think about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any grand philosophical way. I'm a retired firefighter from Cincinnati, not a professor. But when you spend 31 years in a job where one decision in the wrong direction can kill you or the man next to you, you develop a particular respect for the way things connect. Action and consequence. Choice and result. It's not complicated. It's just honest. Kevin made choices, a long string of them, small ones at first, each one probably feeling like not that big a deal in the moment. He copied a key without asking. He installed something on my phone. He drove to Dayton and sat across from an attorney and asked questions about how to have his father declared incompetent. None of those things happened by accident. None of them happened because he's a bad person in some simple, easy-to-label way. They happened because he wanted something, and he let that want override everything else. His judgment, his conscience, the basic decency I know he's capable of. That's not fate. That's a series of decisions, and decisions have weight. What I've come to understand is that the consequences Kevin is living with now, the estrangement, the lost inheritance, the version of his father who no longer opens the door without thinking twice, those aren't punishments I invented. They're the natural result of what he built over 7 months. You can't surveil the person who loves you most, and then be surprised when the trust is gone. The architecture of what he and Darlene constructed collapsed under its own weight. I didn't knock it down. It fell. And then there's Nathan. He noticed something was wrong and didn't panic, didn't confront, didn't act until he was certain. He kept notes. He made calls. He sent 11 words at 2:37 in the morning and trusted me to be steady enough to receive them. That restraint, that intelligence, that's not luck either. Nathan has always been someone who thinks before he moves. He learned that somewhere. I'd like to think some of it came from watching me work, but honestly, a lot of it is just who he is. The point is, his choices had weight too, and they landed differently. I think about the version of me that ignores those 11 words. Who sees that text and goes back to sleep, tells himself Nathan worries too much, signs whatever Kevin puts on that table in the morning. That version of me loses the house on Clover Hill Road, loses the pension Lorraine and I lived carefully for 30 years to protect, maybe loses the ability to make my own decisions entirely. That version of me is not a tragedy. He's a warning about what happens when you love someone so much you stop paying attention. The hardest thing I've had to sit with is that I saw it. Not everything, not the full picture, but enough. The mail, the phone, the questions about my accounts. My gut was telling me something was wrong every time Darlene rearranged my kitchen and smiled like she was doing me a favor. I overrode it, not because I was stupid, but because I wanted to believe the comfortable version of the story. That's a very human thing to do, and it's also a very dangerous one. What I'd say to anyone in a similar situation, and I know from the people who've reached out since I started talking about this, that there are more of you than you'd think, is that your instincts are not being unkind when they're trying to tell you something. Noticing that something feels wrong is not a betrayal of the person you love. It's the most honest thing you can do. for yourself and for them. Kevin needed someone to see him clearly. I failed him there too, just in the opposite direction. I don't know what the next chapter with Kevin looks like. I'm not ready to know yet, but I know who I am. I know what's mine. And I know that paying attention to your gut, to the people around you, to the small things before they become large ones, is not paranoia. It's just wisdom. The kind you earn the hard way,